agreement with Iran is set to expire today.
Our chief foreign correspondent, Trey Yingst, joins us live from Tel Aviv with the latest. Hey, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. Today, the memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran expires, and reports indicate very little progress toward a diplomatic solution that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. International shipping data indicated only 5 cargo ships passed through the strait on Saturday and none on Sunday. This is due to Iran continuing attacks on vessels. A bulk carrier reported being hit by an unknown projectile on Saturday. A day prior, an Emirati oil vessel was also targeted. President Trump said this about the critical waterway on Friday.
After we finish defeating Iran, which is being very badly defeated, pretty soon I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States. Essentially, that's what it is. We have the blockade.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Iran has been using this time to prepare for a return to conflict rather than finding a diplomatic off-ramp. Iranian and Arab officials told the Journal that Iran has produced additional missiles and drones, believing that the United States is waiting for a future attack. This comes as Trump administration officials, including Jared Kushner, are in the region pursuing diplomatic avenues to address the ceasefire in Gaza. Kushner met Sunday in Egypt with Hamas chief Khalil al-Hayya to solidify the process for Hamas to lay down their weapons in Gaza. Kushner was joined by Board of Peace envoys Nikolai Mladenov and Tony Blair. Reports indicate he is meeting today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who recently called the Board of Peace roadmap unacceptable.
Israel does not accept the 15-point document. The IDF will not carry out any withdrawal until Hamas is disarmed. And when I say disarming Hamas, it means heavy weaponry, lighter weaponry, all weaponry. And we're talking about genuine disarmament, not fictitious disarmament.
Now, on the issue of Iran, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said last week in an interview the United States is going to prepare never-before-seen economic pressure on the Iranian regime as this question remains if a diplomatic solution can be reached. Guys?
So they're talking about the Treasury Secretary now as front and center. The 60 days expires just means they're not going to move forward with the deal. It's not as if they go back to war necessarily. But they understand it. Reuters is saying that Bessent is going to do something like this. He's going to hit tougher secondary sanctions on Chinese refiners and banks, aviation restrictions, and further action against entities helping Iran move oil or money. So they're going to go through those dark fleets and make it even tougher for them to make even illicit funds. Does that sound like something that would be unprecedented, Trey?
Absolutely. It would put new economic pressure on Iran. And when we think about these sanctions, you have to think about it like an onion. At the center, you have the U.S. naval blockade, and this is preventing the Iranians from exporting crude oil, their critical export that provides the regime with money not just to pay soldiers, but to produce missiles and drones. But then you have secondary sanctions, and sanctions now that appear will target the countries that are buying oil from Iran, that they're still trying to export on the ground. And so the goal here is to economically isolate the Iranian regime from the rest of the world with no off switch. Because as time moves forward, the Iranians think that they have an advantage. But as a result of the U.S. naval blockade and these additional sanctions, the Iranians are hurting economically. The inflation rate is rapidly rising inside of Iran. And according to regional intelligence sources, they are starting to feel this economic pressure. And that couples with domestic pressure for the regime officials in Tehran.
So, Trey, when you say they're feeling it, which I believe a lot of our intelligence is showing, are we seeing any indication of dissent amongst the IRGC? Are those soldiers not being paid and they're walking off as a result of that? Or do we know?
There are indications that they're having trouble paying certain IRGC officials, and domestically, the cost of food and other goods, it's rising. And this is, again, felt inside of Iran. It is very close to home for those officials in Tehran. But the broader question here is if the Iranians are willing to change their behavior. And each and every day, they are still threatening the United States. They just yesterday put out a bounty on the heads of U.S. soldiers, saying that if anyone in Iran kills a U.S. soldier, that they're going to be paid in cash. They're still threatening the life of President Trump. and they are making a lot of statements about the possibility of returning to direct conflict with the United States. And so, despite the fact that this memorandum of understanding is expiring, there are broader questions about if Iran is serious about a diplomatic off-ramp, or if they are, according to the Wall Street Journal, preparing for a return to combat.
Yeah, Trey, the president was saying yesterday that they're not paying their so-called police, they're not paying their soldiers. Current sanctions are costing Iran an estimated of $435 million per day. There's also a report that the Trump administration opened a back channel to Iran's IRGC because U.S. officials are questioning whether or not the negotiators that represent Tehran have the authority to actually end the war. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, those reports indicate that the Trump administration was able to develop a back channel with IRGC officials using the Kurdish president Barzani in Erbil, and that ultimately he was able to usher messages to IRGC officials who previously weren't in direct communication with the administration. This is not surprising because President Trump has done something that other presidents were not able to do, and that is create a back channel with Iran, not just with the IRGC officials, but with many of these negotiators, including Mohammad Khalibaf, the country's parliament speaker, and Abbas Arghachi. They don't have to wait to come to a physical negotiating table, mediate or Pakistan. They can deliver direct messages. And when we interviewed President Trump at the White House last month, I asked him at that moment, when was the last time that you spoke with an Iranian official? And he said, my team spoke with them an hour ago. And again, this speaks to the real-time messaging back and forth between Washington and Tehran to try and reach an agreement. But again, at this point, the Iranians remain defiant. They are still threatening U.S. forces and personnel across the Middle East. But they have to remember there are still 50,000 U.S. forces deployed across the region, and they are prepared at a moment's notice if President Trump decides to resume combat operations against the regime.
All right. Thanks so much, Trey. We'll see what happens as the MOU expires today. Trey Yingst, thank you so much.
I would like to get some clarity from the White House because I saw in this interview that the vice president did with our own Will Cain, that he said that the number one goal for the administration is to keep oil and gas prices cheap. And then number two is to ensure that they don't get a nuclear weapon. If you're governing this conflict by just gas first, then you're playing into the Iranians' hands. Last time I heard, and I was gone last week, that before I left, the president still said that the number one goal is so they don't get a nuclear weapon.
He said that on Friday in New York.
He did.
So if we're reversing the strategy, that this is an inconsistent message that they need to clarify. Obviously, the president's word is the one I'm going to roll with, but you can't have your chief negotiator governing this, debating this back and forth to get to a resolution with the goal in mind just to get gas prices down. Now, that matters to the American people, and I understand that it matters in the midterms, but the Iranians know that as well. And they're going to keep this going if they know that's top of mind.
You lose leverage if you keep saying, okay, let's hold on to that straight because that's what America cares most about.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox 1.
And now to the conflict in Iran. Today marks the end of a 60-day window to reach a broader ceasefire. It expires with both sides still dug in on the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Iran reportedly says it is shifting its stance from defense to offense. What does that mean? Well, General Jaquin on that last hour.
When you hear phrases like this, we're going on offense, one, that's a threat, and a lot of their threats are hollow. But I do think there is some substance to it. They miscalculate time and time again in not understanding who our president is. If they push in that direction, I suspect the president will come down very, very strong on them once and for all.
Alexandria Hoff has more from the White House. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Dana. Yeah, the 60-day truce officially expires today, but in reality, it had sunk long before the clock ran out due to continued friction over the Strait of Hormuz. And in Long Island yesterday, President Trump, he quipped that once Iran is finished once and for all, that the Strait's control could shift.
Pretty soon, I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States. Essentially, that's what it is. We have the blockade. No ships get through unless we want them to.
On Saturday, Iran's deputy foreign minister responded to that, calling the statement a fanciful delusion, writing, "The Strait of Hormuz has been Iranian, is Iranian, and will remain Iranian. The strait will only be closed and opened under Iran's command." The president telling our Trey Yingst this morning that he is not up against any clock when it comes to this conflict. But, timing is on the mind of military members aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln. Their extended deployment began back on November 21st, following reports of deteriorating conditions and morale. CENTCOM Admiral Brad Cooper, he met with troops aboard the carrier and wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal acknowledging the strain and adding that many elements of those stories are old news. I chatted with junior enlisted personnel and junior officers in small groups. Issues related to food, hot water, and other concerns raised months ago were addressed by leadership and resolved. The crew is tired, but they continue to fire on all cylinders. Today, President Trump's son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner, he is set to hold a lengthy meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. Fox is told by an official familiar the focus is on cooperation with the president's Gaza peace plan. And this follows Kushner's rare meeting with Hamas leaders yesterday in Egypt, where the commitment to demilitarize Gaza was reaffirmed. But Kushner was there to really make sure that there were some concrete steps taken. Dana.
All right, Alex, thanks for that update. A beautiful day at the White House.
So there is a lot to cover with my next guest, Florida Republican Mast, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And sir, thank you for coming back here, and good day to you. I'm going to start with Iran. Iran, 2 hours ago, according to Reuters, says they're going to go on offense. I don't know what that means, but this is what the Wall Street Journal reports. Iran's secret plan to escalate the war. Intercepted communications and other intel suggests a strategic shift by hardline leaders to raise the cost for the U.S. and its regional allies. Would you put two and two together on that conflict right now for us as you see it?
My assessment would be that they're saying that in word, not deed. In word, they're saying they're going to put bounties on U.S. service members of $30,000 a service member. That's word. In deed, I would assess that they are maxed out. They're in high gear as far as the offense that they could deliver, right? Let's not forget, we destroyed their Navy, their Air Force, their weapons manufacturing in large part, their command and control, their communications. All of those are severed substantially. So what they're producing right now and the whack-a-mole that we have to do to respond to it, I would assess that as their maximum capabilities.
Okay, here is CBS from over the weekend. This is Don Bacon, Nebraska Republican retiring, and this is how he sees this.
We cannot allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. I don't think we should allow Iran to kill 1,000 Americans. This should probably been done a long time ago.
Yeah.
But I think he started out this whole war with, this is going to be an easy fight. We're going to be done here. It's going to take a month, 2 months. Okay, we're going to get a deal tomorrow. And I think that those false expectations hurt him.
Okay. A lot of ways to look at this. How do you see commentary like that?
Look, former General Bacon, he's not naive on what he's talking about, right? This has gone on, and it does deplete U.S. stockpiles, but those stockpiles, they exist for us to use for defense, for deterrence, and for eliminating enemies that have been attacking us. And he laid that out as well. Iran has been attacking us for the last 30 years, but even if I gave you a number of the last 30 months, in the last 30 months before Epic Fury, they attacked us over 350 times, killed 3 U.S. service members, countless contractors, driving small boats into our big ships, firing ballistic missiles and drones at us. This has been sustained. And Epic Fury is simply the first time that the United States of America has said, you know what? We're not going to take this anymore. And the only way we bring that forever war to an end is to end those that have been conducting it against us. And so that's what has to be done, no matter how long that takes.
Okay. The last story there in Alex's report from the White House. There is some movement, we do believe, with regard to Gaza. Okay, Jared Kushner meeting in Egypt over the weekend. Here's the headline. Hamas leaders tell Kushner they will demilitarize Gaza, meaning they're going to turn in their guns and their weapons. And Benjamin Netanyahu said over the weekend that Israel's not going to quit the fight in there. Do you see a breakthrough with the Board of Peace in getting Hamas to disarm?
There's a number of breakthroughs there. One, Kushner's there having the debate with all sides of the party. It's all of the entities that are the Board of Peace saying, hey, we want this conflict to come to an end. Here's the resources we're bringing there to have that take place. And then, of course, to have that acknowledgement by Hamas, though they've never given us any reason to trust them, like Iran's never given us a reason to trust them, the fact that they are out there making that as a statement, that is an important step. And so I think it comes down to a chicken or the egg question for the United States, for the Board of of peace for Israel, what has to take place first in order for somebody to actually make a move forward? Do they have to drop the weapons and put up a white flag, or are there attacks until that takes place? And all of that is being worked out by Jared.
It's been a really stubborn thing, and we'll see whether or not we can move the meter on this. Would be a good thing. Brian Mast, thank you for your time. It's good to see you, sir, and thank you for your service. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox 1. All right, now President Trump giving an update on the conflict with Iran, what he's revealing about the current state of play as we mark the passage of a major diplomatic deadline. So good morning, everybody. Hope the weekend was grand. Teams back together in New York. We are fresh and one of us is fresh and rested and ready.
I will carry you through this week. I have got to.
Please do.
But it's really good to be back. I missed everyone. I'm Dana Perino. This is America's Newsroom. And today ends the 60-day window to reach a broader deal with Iran. So that deadline was laid out in the Memorandum of Understanding, an agreement derailed by Iran's attacks on tanker ships and U.S. bases.
So now that fighting has slowed traffic in the strait. This is we get new reporting from the Wall Street Journal. That paper says that Iran used the memo as a stalling tactic and has spent the past 2 months prepping for a larger war.
Meanwhile, President Trump is reiterating his stance on the conflict. He wrote on Truth Social this morning this: "The number one goal is, and always will be, that Iran cannot have, in any way, shape, or form, a nuclear weapon." General Jack Keane is on deck with analysis, but let's begin in Tel Aviv, where Trey Yingst just spoke to President Trump. Good morning, Trey.
Yeah, Dana, good morning. Today, the Memorandum of Understanding between the United States and Iran expires. It's been 60 days since it was signed, and reports indicate very little diplomatic progress to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. All of this is taking place as President Trump told Fox News that Iran should put up the white flag of surrender. He added that, "I have no time schedule. I'm not in a hurry." The president also warned that he would bomb the S out of Oman if they got in the way, as reports indicate ongoing talks between Iran and Oman about control of the strait. Now, international shipping data indicated only 5 cargo ships passed through the strait on Saturday and none on Sunday. This is due to Iran continuing attacks on vessels. A bulk carrier reported being hit by an unknown projectile on Saturday. A day prior, an Emirati oil vessel was also targeted. President Trump said this about the critical waterway on Friday.
After we finish defeating Iran, which is being very badly defeated, pretty soon I'll be declaring the Hormuz Strait a territory of the United States. Essentially, that's what it is. We have the blockade.
This comes as Trump administration officials, including Jared Kushner, are in the region pursuing diplomatic avenues to address the ceasefire in Gaza. Kushner met Sunday in Egypt with Hamas chief Khalil al-Hayya to solidify the process for Hamas to lay down their weapons in Gaza. Kushner was joined by Board of Peace envoys Nikolai Mladenov and Tony Blair. Reports indicate he is meeting today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who recently called the Board of Peace roadmap unacceptable.
Israel does not accept the 15-point document. The IDF will not carry out any withdrawal until Hamas is disarmed. And when I say disarming Hamas, it means heavy weaponry, lighter weaponry, all weaponry. And we are talking about genuine disarmament, not fictitious disarmament.
President Trump told Fox News that Israel should not be targeting Gaza right now and that Hamas has agreed to lay down their weapons. Now, Bill and Dana, we're getting some new information reported by Reuters this hour, just crossing the wires from an Iranian official that says the Iranians have decided to shift their policy from a defensive posture to a fully offensive one. This official goes on to say that Iran has set a deadline for a few weeks for full implementation of the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States. Bill, Dana?
All right, Trey Yingst, thank you. Lots to chew on there.
Yes, so on a Monday, we love to have General Jack Keane with us again today. And, sir, I really appreciate your analysis. A couple things here. What Trey's reporting is hitting the Reuters wire about Iran saying it's going to go on offense. Wall Street Journal's got this headline: Iran's secret plan to escalate the war. And they go into a lot of details about how Iran wants to step this thing up. Based on what you know and your own reporting and your own sources, what do you think of these headlines now?
Well, certainly going to the end, so-called, of the 60-day window here is largely pro forma and symbolic. I mean, we went to the ceasefire on April the 7th and entered a diplomatic phase. And after 4 months of this, to include the agreement we had with the Memorandum of Understanding, which the Iranians blew up a few days after it, despite the fact that the president had signed it, it certainly telegraphed loud and clear to all of us once again that even if Iran makes a deal, they're not going to comply with it. And that's the evidence we have to date. So I have been saying for a few weeks now that I think even though we're in this economic pressure campaign that we're executing, and what Secretary Bessent is doing is certainly remarkable. He's going the furthest we have ever gone in terms of opposing economic peril on the Iranians, in addition to the blockade we have. But I think where the Iranians are, they are going to ride this economic pressure out in their minds. They think they can withstand it. Even if their people rebel again, they will mow them down in the streets. That is where these guys are. And they think they can outlast us in terms of the economic phase of this. At the same time, I have been saying, and I think the Wall Street Journal has picked up on it from their sources, that the Iranians likely, given the midterm elections are coming, will increase the volatility and violence in the area to demonstrate to the American people that the management of the war is not going good. Because where are the Iranians coming from here? They pay huge attention to what happens in the United States and our political will, and they want to affect those elections. They don't want President Trump and the Republicans to maintain the control politically that they have. They would like to see the Democrats get some level of control over. I hate to get involved in politics, but I'm talking about where the Iranians are coming from, not where I'm coming from. And that's what's on their mind here. So yes, when you hear phrases like this, we're going on offense, one, that's a threat, and a lot of their threats are hollow. But I do think there is some substance to it for the reasons I just stated. So it's likely we may see something here going forward. Now, the Iranians, they miscalculate time and time again in not understanding who our president is. Remember, first in 47 years to ever confront him militarily. And two, if they push in that direction, I suspect the president will come down very, very strong on them once and for all. So we'll see where we are here. We're in an economic phase. That's the decision we've made. But the president has lots of options that he can go to in terms of military action when and if needed. That's the reality of it. And in a sense, the ball is a little bit in Iran's court to see what they're going to do here.
We had two other questions. Maybe I'll try to get both of them in. On President Trump last night saying that he has instructed Secretary of War Pete Hegseth to substantially reduce joint military exercises that were scheduled to begin with South Korea. Do you have an opinion on whether that, will give us some context? How should we be thinking about that in our viewers? Is it a big deal or not a big deal? I'm sure for the South Koreans, it feels like a lot.
Yeah, I think there's some frustration over their lack of support for us in the war in Iran. The security arrangement we have with South Korea is all about North Korea. That's what it is. If we want them to do more than that, maybe we should go back and take a look at that security agreement and ask them, as part of the agreement, to assist us where we need help. We're not just going to assist them where they need help in terms of North Korean invasion. We've been here before. The South Koreans have built our military bases. They provide maintenance and logistics for us. They've got a strong military. But we've got 28,500 soldiers who have been there for years, standing tall, making certain that North Korea doesn't go south. And that this relationship will outlast this disagreement we're having right now.
Okay, so the CENTCOM commander visiting the USS Lincoln. There were questions about morale and questions about how these sailors at sea for, 200 days plus and counting, I do believe. And now the USS Washington is going to leave Japan and head for the Persian Gulf and give it relief. General, how significant was that visit, and what's important, do you think, that we should understand?
Yeah, well, first of all, I did talk to Admiral Cooper. He had a great visit with the troops there. They feel good about what's happening here. I've never seen such misrepresentation in the media of the actual facts that took place. A soldier fell overboard and was rescued. They were claiming that multiple soldiers were committing suicide. Not soldiers, sailors. I don't want to insult the sailors by calling them soldiers. But the reality is the misrepresentation has really been quite significant. I mean, I understand people disagree with the war. I got that. It is, and those arguments should be made. But this, I'm glad Cooper went there. He wrote a great article in the Wall Street Journal op-ed that's worth reading to give you his assessment of what's took place. And it's insulting to these troops. I mean, they've been there for a long time, standing tall, representing the United States. And that's what they volunteered to do. And when they're doing something like that, they really feel good about the meaning and the purpose of what it's about, and their families are sacrificing as well. I mean, we should be very proud of them, wrapping our arms around them figuratively in terms of what they've accomplished. Well done. They're heading home to their families. It's good news.
All right, General Jack Keane, thank you as we get started on this Monday.
Thank you, sir. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Just enough for me to run towards knowing nothing in this world will ever break my heart again.
It's a sad day in Hollywood today. Actress Hayden Panettiere has died. She made her name in the television series Heroes and Nashville, one of my favorites. She recently had written a memoir. She was only 36 years old. William Lajeunesse has more as he looks back at her life and legacy as she left it. Hello, William.
Hey, good morning, Dana. You know, she was a rising star who appeared to have it all, right? A young daughter, successful career, awards, several hit songs. Now, a friend found Hayden Panettiere unresponsive Sunday inside a Greenville, South Carolina apartment. EMS responded to a 911 call of a person in cardiac arrest. No sign, just 36.
All right, William Lajeunesse, thank you. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
New Qatari planes say that it does not have the capabilities of the normal Air Force One plane. They rushed the retrofit of this plane.
You reported that the reason Trump flew home on his old plane because of security concerns around this new plane, especially in the middle of a war. Dare I say, no duh. This thing has been so rushed.
There have been many concerns raised by our sources.
The Qatari jet has a wonderful paint job, but apparently it's not as secure as the old plane.
The lack of three things that caused him to fly home on the older Air Force One. It is very clear that the Qatari jet definitely lacks that capability.
It seems apparent that it is not up to the security standards.
Remember that? The liberal media flooding the airwaves with anonymous sources, falsely blaming President Trump's new Air Force One, saying it wasn't ready for an overseas trip and lacked the security features necessary for a threat, saying the old Air Force One was a better plane, even though it's 30 years older. But now we know the president didn't take either plane, that it was actually a shell game organized by America's amazing security officials. Let's welcome former U.S. Army Captain Doug Truax. All right, I think, Doug, thank you so much for joining us. I got to believe that none of the people that we heard from have any clue or idea about the capabilities and anti and countermeasures that those airplanes have. Would that be fair?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a great example, again, of the media having Trump derangement syndrome. They kind of act like, well, why didn't he tell us what's going on here, which defeats the entire purpose of the operation. And ironically, you think about this, it happened a couple of years ago. If it was Barack Obama, the media would have been fawning over, oh, this administration is so smart and this daring move and it's so bold. And, they would have been filming it all differently and talking about it all differently. And instead, we got the situation where they just can't help themselves. Here's a president who's been, shot at every other thing. And it's a dangerous game we're playing with the Iranians, obviously. And so he's got to do what he's got to do. And so you think back to the Obama years, it would have been crazy how these guys would have acted. And then even through the Biden years, I don't think anybody would have, the Iranians wouldn't have gone after Biden because, he wasn't in charge anyway. And so now we're with Trump and they just can't help themselves but to go crazy over this thing. I think it's just a great example of how out of touch they are. It's just a bizarre situation.
Yeah, President Biden could barely negotiate his way across a stage, and they wouldn't cover that story. They kept telling us how vibrant and vigorous he was. That's what everybody was telling us from the White House podium. Mainstream media didn't ever challenge that. But the liberal media today, they're still upset, though, saying they should have been told about the ruse. Have a look, listen to this.
The White House didn't disclose this until now. It essentially left the press and staff on that plane as sort of unwitting decoys for Iran. If you fly in that plane often, you recognize that the security priority is the president and not necessarily anyone else.
Another way of saying decoy is target.
Yeah.
Which is all the people left on that plane.
The fact that they separated Trump from the press pool is also pretty unprecedented.
White House aides and the press on a plane that was the target of an active.
A decoy.
There's an element of transparency here that needs to happen for the sake of the process.
I mean, come on. This is much ado about nothing. It strikes me. It is standard. I mean, would it be standard operating procedure to tell the media, hey, this is our secret operation and this is what we're going to do? I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I don't think that they would keep that secret. And they keep talking about a decoy. It was a military measure. I mean, it's not like the plane went off that they were in and it was completely unprotected. I mean, it still had protection. It still had the same countermeasures, all those things. They're still protecting that plane. There was just another plane that was where they're protecting more, and it was the president's, which is appropriate.
Doug Truax, thank you for your service, and thanks for joining tonight on the Evening Edit. Do appreciate it. All right, still ahead.
Thanks, Jason.
If you can understand the power of compound growth, then this Trump account was worth it just to get your mind thinking about it. But the truth is, the tax benefits are not great on this account. Hey, I'm George Camel, Ramsey personality and co-host of The Ramsey Show. As someone who has a 1-year-old and 3-year-old, I took advantage of this. And on the 4th of July, that $1,000 came into the account for my son. And I went, woo, a little money back from the government that I've given so much to. And so I'm taking the free $1,000 because here's the math on this. If you get the free $1,000, well, that could grow to almost $500,000 or more by the time my kid is 65 without ever adding anything to it. And that's what I want people to understand. If you can understand the power of compound growth, then this Trump account was worth it just to get your mind thinking about it. But the truth is, the tax benefits are not great on this account. So when you think about it this way, save the 529 plan for education. That has way better tax advantages. You're using after-tax income, you withdraw it tax-free, it grows tax-free. That is the best move for education expenses. When it comes to other things, like a custodial Roth IRA is great, but you need earned income. So the real power of the Trump account is that there is no earned income needed. Mom, dad, grandma can shovel money into that account. It'll grow. So if your kid has, let's say, 50 grand by the age of 18, you drop 5 grand in there at age 1, it grows to 50 grand by 18 without touching it. That could be $5 million by the time they're 65. So I love this idea that we could eradicate Social Security one day by creating our own nest egg and getting started early with investing, because the power of compound growth is really the magic here. I love that we're bringing this conversation to the forefront with these Trump accounts, and people are saying, hey, I should invest for my kids. But the sad truth is most Americans aren't investing for themselves, let alone have the ability to invest for their kids. So this is where the Ramsey plan really shines. We tell people, hey, become debt free. Don't owe other people money. Have an emergency fund so that you have the margin to build wealth for yourself. And once you're investing 15% of your own income into your own retirement, then and only then should you be thinking about investing for your kids. Because the truth of the matter is, a lot of kids are having to support their aging parents who didn't plan for their own retirement. So now they're having to fund their retirement while trying to support their own life and their own kids. So this has put a real bind and burden on the younger generations. And I don't want to do that to my kids, and I don't want them to have to fund my retirement. So if you can get this early, this mindset that compound growth is the key, that owing other people money will hurt my own chances at retiring with dignity, then you can make a plan. And the Trump account can be a part of that. I hope the 529 plan is a part of that to avoid this whole student loan crisis. And I hope that you have the ability to leave that legacy where your kids went, wow, I can't believe the advantage that my parents gave me by setting me up in this way.
Congress right now is on August recess. The House is slated to return August 31st, with 4 legislative weeks on the calendar before leaving Washington again in October. That leaves just 16 scheduled legislative days for the House to pass the remainder of President Trump's agenda. That is before, of course, the midterm elections, and this includes a stopgap government funding bill, Reconciliation 3.0, and the Save America Act. Joining me now is Nebraska Congressman Michael Flood. He also sits on the House Financial Services Committee. Congressman, what can realistically get done before the midterms?
Well, I think a lot, actually. Before we left for our recess in very late July, we passed all of the bills that you just mentioned, the SAVE Act, Reconciliation 3.0, the Farm Bill, and that stopgap measure to address the continuing resolution to fund the government from October 1 to December, early December. All of those received majority votes in the House. The Senate, they did act on a continuing resolution, which I think we can easily adopt when we get back here in a couple of weeks. But I'm confident we can get the people's business done in September and make our case to the voters as we head to Election Day.
Obviously, funding the government is the most important piece of the agenda. And to be clear, you're right. Save America has been passed multiple times by the House. It's in the Senate. But still, there is no signal coming from Senate Majority Leader John Thune that he's got the votes to get the full bill through. So do you think it might go through in pieces?
Well, potentially. I mean, at least do the money for the Department of War. Our war fighters need to replenish their munitions. We've used a lot in Venezuela and now Iran. Regardless of where you're at in Iran, this is a national security issue. This is taking care of our armed forces, of our national security, making sure we have the munition needed to protect our homeland and our allies and our interests across the world.
All right, let me ask you about what's happening with regards to the midterms, because Republicans are looking to hold on to this razor-thin majority, not just in the House, but also in the Senate. The Democrats are leading Republicans on a generic ballot poll by 8 points and leading on the economy, despite the rise of these socialist candidates coming from the left. The vice president shared a warning to Republicans about economic messaging. Watch this.
My warning to my fellow Republicans, Will, would be if we don't get this right, don't blame young people for being sympathetic to socialism. We've got to blame ourselves. And I think what is so unique and refreshing about Donald Trump's economic policies is that it's not the same old economic, ideas that you would have heard 30, 40 years ago. He's talking about rebuilding our industrial base, rebuilding the heartland, making our streets safer, making it possible for young people to afford to buy a home. This is how you stop socialism. You don't stop socialism by throwing slogans at people about the free market. As much as I love the free market, you stop socialism by making people's lives better. And that's what we're trying to do every single day.
Congressman, a recent Fox News poll finding just 50% of Americans have a positive view of capitalism. You're on the Republican Main Street Caucus. Actually, you chair the Republican Main Street Caucus. How do Republicans turn all this around by November? And I want to read you this. This comes from, believe it or not, the Wall Street Journal. Rural economic pain tests the GOP's grip on a Trump stronghold. They're talking about Iowa, Congressman.
Well, I'm very close to Iowa. I can't speak too much as to what's going on. I know in Nebraska, I live in a town with 1,000 steelworkers. I saw some of them over the weekend. They came up to me and I said, "How's it going?" They said, "We've never been busier." I said, "What's going on?" He's like, "Industry, buying our steel, buying our hoist and everything else. Like, it's amazing right now. They are going full speed." And they were excited. And when Nucor steel employees in my hometown are doing well, America is building. And that's what we want. We want to see this kind of excitement all over. Listen, we need the Farm Bill passed. We need year-round E15. We delivered on crop insurance, more price supports. So I do think we're going a good direction. We need to land the plane in November. And when people find out what socialism really is, they will rue the day they went that direction, because it has a bad outcome. It always has. It always will.
No. We've been talking about that already this morning. I've got Liz Peek on set. She's got a question for you.
Good morning, Congressman. Polling by John McLaughlin shows that voters actually want to see in that Reconciliation 3.0 serious tax measures, lower taxes for middle-class Americans, indexing capital gains to inflation, things like that. It just seems to a lot of us that the Republicans in the Senate in particular, and also in the House, are just not getting the message from voters that they need relief on taxes and on prices. Why is this such an issue for Republicans?
Well, we passed the biggest tax cut in American history
year
last
ago.
year.
I know.
And we're talking about Reconciliation 4.0. Listen, the White House came to us and said, let's keep this very focused and simple. Money for the troops, money for the farmers, SAVE Act. Those three things. We ultimately agreed with the caveat in the House that a Reconciliation 4.0 would happen. Jody Arrington, August Pfluger, these are two Texas House members that feel as strongly as you and I and all of us do about cutting taxes, doing some of the things that you just talked about. And quite frankly, we didn't have the time to put it all together and land the plane, but we will, regardless of what happens on Election Day, we will have that opportunity going into 2027. And hopefully we have both chambers in the White House and we can take a little bit more time and deliver it as early as Q1 of 2027.
You mentioned Congressman August Pfluger. He's actually going to be with Energy Secretary Chris Wright down in Midland, Texas today, talking about U.S. production of oil and gas. I mean, this is where Exxon is and ConocoPhillips. I mean, along those lines, when you've got more than 50% of Americans, some polls show 2/3 of Americans say that there is economic hardship being placed on them because of high gasoline prices. How do you respond to that?
Well, we need to be energy independent. We were making strides under George W. Bush to get there. President Obama came in, and then obviously Donald Trump only 4 years. Biden got 4 more years. And here we are paying attention to the Strait of Hormuz. Listen, we've got enough energy in Alaska to take care of us. We can get this done. And what August Pfluger is doing today is no doubt a step in that direction. He's a great member. He's focused on the right issues. And I think when he settles on Reconciliation 4.0, he will be a major author of it and a proud parent of it.
All right, we're going to be watching it. Congressman Michael Flood, thank you so much for being with me this morning. Appreciate it, sir. We'll be right back, everybody. And now there is this. CENTCOM Commander Admiral deployment related to the Iran conflict. Cooper writing about it in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, quote, I was blown away by this strong group of high-achieving Americans standing tall with justified pride at everything they have accomplished. The crew is tired, but they continue to fire on all cylinders. History will record this deployment as one of the most operationally intense and consequential of the modern era. Now, the Lincoln spent more than 200 days in a combat zone. It launched more than 10,000 sorties, playing a central role in U.S. airstrikes and the naval blockade of Iranian ports. Joining me now is former Trump Deputy National Security Advisor and CPAC board member, Katie McFarland. Katie, I want to get your thoughts on that this morning because, there's been criticism on these reports that several of these crew members aboard the Lincoln had tried to jump overboard. Obviously, there's conflicting accounts coming from the ship. What is your reaction and your assessment of what's happening right now?
It's a long deployment. It's probably one of the longest deployments any aircraft carrier has ever had. And so at the end of every deployment, there are going to be people who want to get home and are complaining. But by and large, if you look at the success rate of what the Abraham Lincoln has done, it's extraordinary. They've been the superstars of the Iran war, and the entire blockade is really, a lot of that is rested on them. So if there were problems, I think that of any administration that I've worked for, this is the administration that would listen to the problems and pay attention to them. The focus of the entire Trump administration and of Pete Hegseth as Secretary of War and as Hung Kao as Secretary of the Navy is to make sure that our men and women in uniform have what they need, and not only in a military sense, but in a health sense and in every other way. So I'm not really worried about this. I think it's a natural thing that happens at the end of every deployment. I'm a Navy mom. I've heard those kind of complaints from my family members too at the end of their deployments. By and large, the United States Navy is in terrific shape.
All right. Well, and certainly, of course, we thank your son for his service, but certainly we all care about the health. And is it your daughter? I did not know that, Katie. But, I think that the health and safety of our troops is just so important. And I wanted to get your take on that. Obviously, the foreign policy story is ever changing right now. So the U.S. and Iran reached a critical deadline today. The 60-day ceasefire agreement is coming to an end. And the president just confirming to Fox's Trey Yingst that there's this back channel with the IRGC to get this deal done. Iran reportedly put a $30,000 bounty on anyone who kills or captures a U.S. service member. And at the same time, the Trump administration is preparing to hit Tehran with even more economic pressure, including potential sanctions on Chinese refiners and banks who help Iran sell oil, KT. What is your take on the state of things right now and where we are with these negotiations with the Iranians? And maybe we should more talk about our negotiations with the IRGC.
Look, I don't think whatever negotiations we have with the IRGC, they're probably not going to honor them. But there's another way to deal with this, and that's to squeeze Iran so badly that they have no choice but ultimately to sign some kind of an agreement with us. It's hard to be patient. And I've always thought there's an old Chinese saying, there are two ways to kill a snake. One way is to chop off his head, and the other way is to starve him to death. Now, chopping off the head has a lot of risk to it. You know, you might miss. The snake might bite you in the process. Starving a snake takes a lot longer, but it's just as effective. The snake dies. And so I think what's happening here is that we're slowly strangling Iran, and particularly Iran's economy. You know, the blockade is thanks to the USS Abraham Lincoln. That blockade has worked. No ships are getting in, therefore you have massive inflation in Iran. No ships are getting out, no oil's getting out, therefore Iran is getting no income. Their economy is in free fall. And even murderous, messianic dictators need to worry a little bit about a population of 90 million people that they're starving and causing great suffering. So I think at some point, next week, next month, next whatever, Iran is going to have to really come to terms and come to terms on our terms. The other thing I would say, though, is everything about the Strait of Hormuz, it's working. If it weren't working, you would have oil $120 a barrel. It's not. Oil is just hardly even 10% more than it was a barrel before the war began. So oil's getting out, whether it's by pipelines, whether it's about tankers with their responders turned off, or whether oil's coming from the United States to fill in the gap of Middle East oil. So that Strait of Hormuz, that choke point, that blackmail ability that Iran has held over our head for 50 years, it's not going to be the case in 10 years. The Strait of Hormuz won't matter.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because the question now is what is next and where do we go from here? Because there's the Wall Street Journal is quoting these Arab intelligence officials that have picked up evidence. They report there are communications between Iran and militia allies in countries like Yemen and Iraq, and that the Gulf countries like Kuwait are alarmed by this new intelligence that is coming forth, and that basically that Iran is, in essence, preparing for the next section of this war, and that negotiations to them is just, it's all fodder.
Yeah, negotiations are just a stalling pattern, I think, on their behalf. What I'm worried about, I think ultimately Iran succumbs. But what I'm worried about in the near term is exactly what you've said, that Iran is going to look for some October surprise. They want to affect the American election. What can they do? Well, they don't have any Air Force. They don't have any Navy. They don't have any air defense systems left. What could they do? They could fire some missiles at the neighboring countries. Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. They can cause problems in the neighborhood to our allies in the neighborhood. Can we deal with those problems? Yeah, but it's got our Gulf allies extremely nervous about it. And I think that's one of the reasons we've not escalated any military action at this point. We're squeezing that snake to death. We haven't gone to chop the head off.
Yeah, no, and certainly, using those proxies, I think is, they've done this before and they may do it again. To your point, I want to ask you about also what's happening with U.S. Special Envoy for Peace, Jared Kushner. He's in Egypt right now. He is pushing and meeting with Hamas to accept disarmament as the Trump administration tries to revise a Gaza ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has rejected the current framework. He says Hamas has to give up weapons before Israel agrees to do a full withdrawal. The president told Trey Yingst just a few moments ago that Israel should not be striking Gaza, and that, quote, we have our own relationship with Hamas. They're giving up their guns. What is your take on this right now?
Okay, it was a really good peace plan because it's a staged and phased withdrawal of Israel, and it's a phased disarmament of Hamas, and both sides have agreed to it. I think what Jared is doing now is shuttle diplomacy. When I worked for Henry Kissinger in the 1970s, when we had the first Middle East shuttle diplomacy, what the person who's doing the shuttling, in this case Jared Kushner, in that case Henry, the other, they nudge this side, they nudge that side, and they keep everybody in the game, and I think that's what's happening now. Again, if you and I had had this conversation a year ago and we talked about Gaza, we would have talked about the fighting in Gaza, the war. We would not be talking about Gaza, the peace plan.
Real quick before you go, KT, what do you make of these reports that it was President Trump that told Secretary Hegseth pull back on the joint drills with the South Koreans?
Yeah, so this is the annual exercise that's a really big thing. So if we cut back on it a little, I don't think it's as big a deal. I mean, in part, it's to like a little slap in the face to South Korea, who didn't help us with Iran. In part, it's because we don't have as many military assets in the region. A lot of them are in the Middle East. And in part, it's to save money. We're focused on different things for the very moment. And I don't think that exercise canceling it would be one thing, but to reduce it, I don't think is that big a deal, given the current circumstances.
Great to talk to you, KT McFarland, as always. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back, everybody. Thanks.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch on Fox One.
Accused of killing her 3 young children is back on trial this week. Lindsay Clancy breaking down in court this week as the medical examiner described the autopsy of her 5-year-old daughter. Clancy does not dispute that she killed her 3 children. Her lawyers contend she suffered from severe postpartum depression, even psychosis, and is not criminally responsible. Criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool joins me now. It would seem a stretch, Brian, when a woman admits that, killed her kids, it would seem a stretch to get her found not guilty. But there is some compelling evidence that we'll get to in a moment. What do you think the chances are that her team can get her off?
Hey, John, always great to see you again. Yeah, look, anytime you have an insanity defense, in Massachusetts, it's called lack of criminal responsibility. Same thing as insanity. But look, those cases are usually dead on arrival. Why? Because they're a complete defense. What does that mean? That means they would walk free, right? If Clancy got off on this, she walks free. It's a complete defense. But look, in this case, I think there is a glimmer of hope for her defense team to get 1, 2, maybe 3 jurors. I think the best she'll do is a hung jury. But look, the fact she's even in the game is compelling. And the reason why, John, because the defense team has created a trial within a trial. That means she has put on trial the mental health system of the United States. Multiple calls she made threatening to kill herself, telling a nurse practitioner, hey, look, I can't take care of myself. I don't know what's going to happen to the kids either. And then nothing was done to intervene to get her the proper treatment.
Yeah, and her defense team is also saying that her doctors way overprescribed medication. I want to put a list of some of those. Many of the names are hard to pronounce. There's amitriptyline, busoprone, the one commonly known as Klonopin, and on and on and on. 13 medications that were given to this woman. Sometimes with one doctor not even knowing what another doctor was prescribing, according to the defense. That has to do a lot to help a jury understand that she was maybe over-medicated.
Yeah, John, you make a great point about the lack of communication, right? I mean, look, this is not the Twinkie defense, right? You've heard about these crazy insanity defenses. This is about a 4 to 5 month window, John, leading up to the death of her kids, where she was reaching out for help. And you're right. I wrote it down. 5 doctors, 30 prescriptions, 13 different medications. Now, you tell me if none of those mental health providers are communicating as to potential side effects. I'm familiar with a couple of those drugs. And when they're combined, they get a severe depression. And that's exactly what she was experiencing here. And look, John, little things could have taken place. For example, one of these nurse practitioners could have called Child Protective Services. The children are the most important thing here. Why did anyone call CPS? They are mandated reporters. When somebody calls and says, I think I'm going to kill myself and I don't know what's going to happen to my kids, you have a duty, a legal duty to call CPS. There could have been what's called family therapy installed here, where you separate the kids, parents, grandparents are together. Let's try to get this woman better. So look, I do think she's got, some traction to potentially get a couple of jurors to side with her.
Let's turn our attention to another big case that is attracting an awful lot of attention. That's Luigi Mays' case. in Manhattan. He's the guy accused of shooting Brian Thompson, the healthcare executive. He pleaded guilty to a couple of charges of stalking, federal charges, and now his attorneys are saying you can't charge him for murder in state court because of double jeopardy laws. Listen to this and let's get your reaction.
New York law does not permit a person to be prosecuted and punished twice for the exact same crime under a statute that governs successive prosecutions. It's also known as the double jeopardy law. Today's guilty plea triggers the statute, and we just filed our motion in state court explaining why the state charges must be dismissed under New York's double jeopardy protections.
So he pleads guilty to a couple of charges that could still bring him life in prison, federal charges, but now they're asking the state to throw out the charges, the murder charges. Is this really good and clever lawyering, or is this a Hail Mary?
This is high risk. This is a high risk poker table in Las Vegas, John. And here's why. We have what's called dual sovereignty in the United States. That's a federal doctrine, by the way. What does that mean? You can charge somebody and prosecute them in state court and federal court for the same crime, right? Well, New York comes up with this crazy law that no other states have that says, oh, well, you can't be prosecuted for the same crime in both state and federal court if it emanates from the same fact pattern. Well, here's the bad news for Mangione's team and why they may lose on trying to throw out the state charges. It is called the supremacy clause. Have we forgotten that you cannot have a state law that directly conflicts with a federal law? John, Article 6, Clause 2 of the Constitution says you cannot have a state law directly conflicting with a federal law. And that's exactly what that New York law does. So if I'm Alvin Bragg, New York City attorney, that is my first argument. I hope he's watching this, dude. That's what you have to be arguing, that this state law is thrown out, it's not effective, conflicts with federal law, and this guy Mangione should face murder charges in the state case.
Yeah, it's fascinating that his team gets him to plead guilty. He said in his plea that he murdered Brian Thompson, even though it's a stalking charge. But they don't want him to face trial on the state level. Brian Claypool, we have to say goodbye. Brian, good to see you. Thank you.
You bet.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on full shows streaming now on Fox.
To like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox 1.
Polls show Donald with a commanding lead. He's up 34 points on Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins. He's up 5 in a potential matchup with Democrat David Jolly, whose platform, well, it sounds like it could come right out of the DSA playbook.
PPS should be extended for our Haitian Floridians. If we are unwilling to welcome the refugee in a time of crisis, we might as well throw the Statue of Liberty into the East River. I proposed an Office of Civil Rights within the governor's office. Whether it is black and brown communities or LGBTQ plus communities, the reality is we need somebody to defend the personal rights of everybody. Republicans right now, they don't believe the economy should work for everybody. They just think raw economic growth that benefits the billionaires is okay.
Yeah, Donald sports an endorsement from President Trump, and he's looking to lock up the nomination. But Governor Ron DeSantis, he's not endorsed a candidate in this yet. If elected, Donald will be the first black governor in Florida. Joining us now for tonight's big close-up is Florida gubernatorial candidate and Congressman Byron Donalds. He's got a whole crowd there behind him cheering him on. Congressman, thank you for joining us tonight. It looks like you're the clear front runner in this primary, but we got to get through the election to find out if you are the nominee coming into the general election. How do you sort yourself from someone like David Jolly, who was once a Republican himself?
Well, first of all, look, Florida, we are the free state of Florida. We're a red state. Ron DeSantis has done a tremendous job. And you got a guy like David Jolly, who quite frankly wants to have us follow Virginia and follow New York and follow New Jersey. But that's not what the people of Florida want. The people of Florida, what they want is to remain free. They came here for a reason, to chase that Florida dream. And so over the next 79 days or so, we are going to be crisscrossing Florida and making sure that we keep the Florida dream alive. alive and well. For all of the people that have chosen the state and many people who have lived here as fourth, fifth, sixth generation Floridians, Florida's going to remain number one. That's how we defeat David Jolly this November.
Congressman Lisi here. It's great to see you. I'm no longer in Florida, but if I were, you'd have my vote. I've got to ask you, though, so you've been in the race for about 18 months. Now, depending on the poll, the numbers look different, but one of your recent internal polls had 23% of voters still undecided. Why are so many voters unpersuaded after being in this race for so long? And how do you think that might impact the general election?
Well, first of all, Lisa, appreciate your support. I think, look, primaries are tougher races. A lot of our voters were kind of really taking their time to get into it. What we're starting to see is the undecided numbers come down very, very fast. But one thing that's been consistent, we've had a strong lead. But it's not just about the polling. My campaign, we've knocked over 550,000 doors all across Florida, talking about affordability, making sure we protect our ag lands and the beauty of our state while we plan for the future. Because we are going to have a growing economy in this state. We want to make sure that we balance growth with our beauty and make sure our kids are prepared to exceed and take the reins of leadership here in Florida. So even though there's been some undecided out there, our numbers have continued to grow throughout this entire campaign. We feel very good going into Tuesday, but it's up to the people of Florida. Make sure you get out and vote on Tuesday.
Congressman, I want to get your take on another story, but real quickly before I do, I just have to ask you about that Governor Ron DeSantis endorsement or lack thereof. What do you think is stopping current Governor DeSantis, who's very popular in Florida, from giving you his endorsement?
Honestly, I think the governor's been focused on leading Florida, and that's what his focus has been on. Obviously, he stayed out of this primary, and that's okay. But we anticipate having his support for the stretch run this November, because at the end of the day, we don't want to be what happened to Virginia. In Virginia, they elected Abigail Spanberger, and the second she got elected, even though she campaigned like this big moderate, second she got elected, she undid everything that Glenn Youngkin did in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I think Governor DeSantis and all Republicans in our state know that we can leave nothing to chance. We can't just rest on our laurels. I anticipate to have the governor's support, and we move forward.
Thank you for that, Congressman. I want to now turn to the story about the Southern Poverty Law Center. I know you've been all over this. Their former CFO was arrested Wednesday in connection to the misuse of funds by the organization. Take a listen.
There is a new indictment that includes the former CFO of SPLC. I believe she was part of the effort to open bank accounts in completely fictitious companies' names and make payments that to individuals for reasons that were not that were not accurate as described.
Prosecutors allege money from donors funded extremist activity, including Ku Klux Klan rallies, propaganda, materials for robes, hoods, and cross burnings. The indictment also alleges 2 KKK members were paid to stay in that group after trying to leave. Can you give us an update on where things stand there and if we're going to see some accountability?
We need to see accountability on this one. Look, let's be very clear. Southern Poverty Law Center is a group that kept looking for a reason to exist. When if you travel this country, you realize that our people, our country, whether you're white, black, or Hispanic, we just want to live in harmony and peace with our fellow neighbors in our country. So you have a group whose entire existence was trying to find racism where it didn't exist. We're glad that we're seeing that these people are going to be held accountable on Capitol Hill. I'm calling on my colleagues in the House and the Oversight Committee with Chairman James Comer. We need to do investigations on this, and I think this is something where you could potentially see Florida's Attorney General also engage in this matter. Listen, we know that there are nonprofit groups who want to do things that are civically minded, but when your entire purpose is to keep hatred alive just so you can continue to have donors and seek relevance, that's sick and it's disgusting, and that's the stuff in our politics that really needs to stop.
Congressman, this is Jason Chaffetz here. Following up on that, the Department of Justice is saying there are millions of dollars that were funneled to these extremist groups. FBI Director Kash Patel said the investigation still continues on. In general, above and beyond the Southern Poverty Law Center, how concerned are you that these NGOs, under the guise of do-gooder organizations with tax benefits from the taxpayers, that they inject themselves into political quests into political elections rather than just donating through, say, the Democratic Party. How concerned are you about that? What should be done?
I'm very concerned. This is one of the reasons why when President Trump came back, we were going through the process of going through USAID with the fine-tooth comb, shutting down some of these groups because they are taking the taxpayers' money to divide the American people. And this is why also on Capitol Hill, one of the reasons I support ending the Senate filibuster the way it exists today and moving to a talking filibuster like Mike Lee wants to do. It's not just to pass the Save America Act. It's also that through the budget process in D.C., you can stop funding these organizations with federal tax dollars. Because what ends up happening is you get Senate Democrats who just refuse to vote for any funding if you're not, frankly, funding these front groups. And they've been disastrous for our country for a very long time. So we need to be looking at their tax status, their nonprofit status, because they're not engaged in activities that they told the American taxpayer they were engaged in. They've been trying to subvert our nation and really dismantle the political cohesion of Americans overall. So I think I'm glad to see Kash Patel and his investigations. We know that the head of the Department of Justice, I'm quite sure Mr. Blanche, is looking at this very, very closely. But we need to have a true accountability, and justice has to be done on behalf of the American people.
Congressman, real quick before I let you go, you are looking to follow in the footsteps of Ron DeSantis, and he has been, by all accounts, a very successful governor in getting his agenda passed in the state. One example, redistricting. He calls for it the first week of January. By the end of April, it's done in the Florida legislature and headed to him. Do you think you'll have a similar relationship with the Florida legislature, and do you plan on having a similar pace as far as your agenda in the state of Florida?
Absolutely. Look, the members of the legislature, we've had many of opportunities to talk. Some of them I served with when I was in the State House 8 years ago. And so one of the things that they want to make sure we do is we do everything from elections to securing our nation here in Florida. We're going to continue to work with the federal government in 287G. We want to protect our ag lands, prepare for our future, and make sure that our water and our resources are protected as well. And so we're going to be about the business of all the things that are critical to the future of Florida. We want to make sure that that Florida dream is alive and well, and that we remain the free state of Florida.
Congressman Byron Donalds, candidate for governor, thanks for joining us. Good luck real soon.
Thank you, guys. Take it easy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Tommy, I'll bring it out to you. He touched on we questioned him on a few things here. I think that last question is one I find most interesting, is that, there are people that didn't like Ron DeSantis nationally as president, but when it comes to Florida, he didn't have trouble getting reelected. And at the end of the day, when he wanted something done, he had a legislature there, and he got it done quick. And I think that's kind of his legacy in Florida, and Byron Donalds seems to want to set himself up the same way.
There's a reason why we used to say, make America Florida, and that's because of the leadership of Governor Ron DeSantis. And I think that Florida has become redder under Governor Ron DeSantis, probably because so many New Yorkers and others have gone to Florida. Lisa did, and then she decided to come back. And,
I know, I'm an idiot. I'm the only one coming here.
Listen, we gave her some grief for it, but she wanted to be in this building, which is a safe place for freedom. But beyond that, yes, so many people have come to Florida. It's gotten redder. So I think that if Byron is the candidate, which it looks like he will be, I think that he will have amazing success in that race, and I think he will be the governor, and I think that he would be wise to have, to your point, a similar pace as Governor Ron DeSantis. Block out all of the other noise and focus on your state. That's something that Governor Ron DeSantis did so well, especially during the COVID times, right? Everybody else was saying, you can't do this, so much scrutiny, you're going to kill grandma, and Governor Ron DeSantis said, I'm going to do what's right for Florida. I think that Governor Byron Donalds, and I'm hopeful that he will do the same, because Florida deserves that. There's so many New Yorkers, right, that they fled, and unlike Lisa, they're staying.
They're smarter.
Look, Byron Donalds thrived as a congressman in large part because he has a very impressive financial background, and going into the governor's office, I used to be chief of staff to a governor once upon a time. Dealing with the state budget, the size of the state of Florida, that bodes well. But he also showed that he actually does what he says he's going to do, which is a rarity, and I think the people of Florida are figuring that out. And so, look, he's been a positive candidate, and his wife's been heavily involved and engaged in education issues. That bodes well. So it seems like he's going to coast at that point, and then I can't imagine, without some other scandal or something happening, I can't imagine that he loses in November.
Lisa, what's your reaction to the interview?
Well, look, I think Governor DeSantis, he's going to endorse Byron Donalds once he wins the primary, and I guarantee he's going to put his entire team behind him, and he's also going to have President Trump's team. Both parties, both Governor DeSantis and President Trump, they know how to win the state of Florida. You look at how amicable Governor DeSantis is now with President Trump after that nasty primary fight. So I think Republicans are going to all come together behind Byron Donalds. It's interesting, too, because if you go back to 2020, Democrats and registered voters had about 100,000 vote lead. And then you go to October 2025, Republicans surpassed them by almost 1.4 million. So that's the growth of Republicans in the state of Florida. So Byron Donalds, that's some good math working in his favor, even in a tough environment. The last thing I want to add is about the Southern Poverty Law Center, because they said they were fighting hate, and now we find out that they were manufacturing it. And particularly with their involvement in the 2017 Charlottesville rally, that was the whole basis of Joe Biden's election in 2020, that he was fighting for the soul of America. He accused President Trump of saying that the neo-Nazis and KK were very fine people, even though he categorically denied them and said that he condemned them. And so that was the whole basis. And also that is what has led to almost 3 assassination attempts against President Trump's life, because all of these crazy people believed that he was a fascist. And then now we come to find out with these allegations with the Southern Poverty Law Center that they might have been paying to manufacture and create a lot of that hate. So
yeah, it seemed that the potential first black governor of the state of Florida did not think that racism is rampant in this country like that center apparently tried to purchase. One last thing on this topic, I will say this: Florida has become that beacon for conservative politics as far as the state goes. I think they've even surpassed Texas when it comes to things like the culture war, response to COVID, disaster response, which is a big deal in this country, especially on the East Coast, but all over. And so Ron DeSantis's legacy in those ways shows you can fight those things head on, immigration even, and become more red from a purple state. So I hope that if there is a Governor Donalds, he does the same thing.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Well, the heat is still on the Senate, despite senators being home on summer recess. President Trump continues to eye voter ID as his top legislative priority. The Save America Act is stalled in the Senate, and House Speaker Mike Johnson wants to help the president bring it over the finish line.
In New Jersey a few weeks back, remember, they voluntarily told us they found 6,600 non-citizens registered to vote in that state. So this is a serious problem. Election integrity is a top priority and issue for the president. The last version we sent over on a budget resolution for a reconciliation bill to the Senate, and I'm very hopeful they'll process that very quickly, because we added election integrity, the Save America Act, with some funding for troops and farmers. I don't think anybody who has common sense can vote against that.
Let's bring in New Jersey Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew, a member of the House Judiciary Committee. So the roadblock seems to be not in the House, but in the Senate. What are the chances, do you think, that the SAVE Act ultimately does get passed?
It's going to be hard, but we're really going to push for it. I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, it is simplistic, but true to say, if you are voting in an American election, you should be an American. There's nothing complicated about that. Then we've been told for years, well, there are no non-Americans that are voting in our elections. And of course, we see that there were 6,600 that willfully, openly admitted it. We don't know how many people lied. We've got to dig into that. Maybe, John, we can talk about that a little bit in a minute, what we're doing on the House side, what I'm doing in my committee, and how we want to proceed forward. But it is ridiculous. You should not need 60 votes to get something done in the Senate. And believe me, if the Democrats ever take control, they're not going to abide by the filibuster. This filibuster is a relatively new development in American history. The old filibuster was a standing filibuster where people could talk a long time and slow things down. But, we almost need a super majority to get anything done in the Senate. It's absurd. Basically, it's saying we don't want to do anything at all. And quite frankly, Americans are tired of it. and I'm tired of it.
Your governor, New Jersey Governor Mikey Sherrill, surprised a lot of people this week when she said she is in favor of voter ID laws, but she doesn't like the SAVE Act. Listen.
Whether or not you would support some kind of voter ID.
Certainly, if that was the law passed here, I would support that. I don't have a problem with voter ID. I think it gets a little conflated sometimes with the SAVE Act, which is the federal piece of legislation that you often hear about. That is a voter suppression piece of legislation.
How does the SAVE Act end up becoming voter suppression, according to the governor?
The SAVE Act is a robust example of what voter ID is about. In the SAVE Act, when you register to vote, you have to have a number of forms of ID, just like you have to have with anything else, whether you go into a federal building or a liquor store or buy a firearm. There's nothing wrong with that. And that's all the SAVE Act basically does. But by the way, just so we all know, the Senate wasn't even willing to vote for a simple ID bill the other day, as we all saw. We didn't even get it through. Just showing ID and not even being nearly as robust and comprehensive a plan as the SAVE Act. Look, this is a cherished thing. Men and women died for the right to vote in the United States of America. We have to protect it. We have to take care of it. We have to make sure that real people are voting. Only those that should vote should be allowed to vote. I don't know how else to say it.
It seems like it's a fairly black and white issue for Americans. A Fox News poll asked if valid photo ID should be required to prove U.S. citizenship before being allowed to register to vote. 83% said you got to have ID to register. And then just to vote, a slightly smaller number, 77%, say you ought to be required to produce voter ID. If it's that kind of overwhelming support, Congressman, why is it so difficult to get this legislation passed?
Well, first of all, it's humorous to me, and I'm happy. I'm happy that the governor now thinks you need to have some form of ID. The left has fought this time and again, over and over again. They don't want ID. You tell me, John, what's the only reason you don't want to have voter ID? It means you want people voting that shouldn't be voting. And that's wrong. And that I'm sad to say, but that is what some of the folks on the left want. They want people voting that shouldn't be voting. Otherwise, they would have no problem with this. Now, it's so unbelievably popular. Even some Democrats, all Republicans, all independents, whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, everybody agrees because they cherish our right to vote that you should have ID. So even the governor now begrudgingly has to go along that, yes, you need voter ID as well because she's been embarrassed. I mean, here all along, remember, John, folks like me for years have been saying something was wrong. And we were told we were xenophobic, that we were racist, that we were conspiracy theorists. And here we come out in our own state of New Jersey, and I'm embarrassed and sad to say this, there were thousands and thousands of people that registered to vote, and get this, admitted that they were illegal, and admitted and said, yes, we're registered to vote, and New Jersey did nothing about it. Gosh knows how many people are on the rolls and have voted who just didn't tell the truth. We got to straighten this out. That's why my subcommittee, where I'm chairman on oversight and judiciary, we have contacted the lieutenant governor for his piece of it, who's working with the software company to find out what went wrong, because it's not the software company's fault that these illegals were voting. We're working with the Attorney General's office. We've gotten the chairman of the committee and myself have gotten information over him and asked him to check into all this. I'm having a hearing on it as well. We're going to keep pushing and we're going to keep working on it because this is a really, really big deal. This should have never happened.
That's just the state of New Jersey. There could be others as well. Congressman Jeff Van Drew, Republican of New Jersey, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on
to a Fox News exclusive with top Trump envoy Jared Kushner as the 60-day memorandum of understanding between the United States and Iran expires, and he meets with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today. This is the two sides discuss the demilitarization of Gaza. Our chief foreign correspondent Trey Yingst just spoke to Jared Kushner. He reports live from Tel Aviv now with the latest. Hi, Trey.
Yeah, hey, John, good afternoon. Special Envoy Jared Kushner back in the Middle East, where he met today with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after speaking with Hamas leadership yesterday in Egypt. The Special Envoy telling Fox News that the roadmap to demilitarize Gaza was discussed with new breakthroughs. Take a listen.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu recently called the Board of Peace roadmap unacceptable. Are you asking the Prime Minister to change his thinking?
I think that was his perception of the plan as he got it. I think today we had a very, very good meeting. We were there for almost 4 hours with him and his team going through all the different details. I think there were some valid concerns that they raised that we were able to address. And we were able to go through some of the misunderstandings and misinformation that's been out about it as well. I mean, certain things like we're very committed to the fact that we have a plan to rebuild Gaza, but we will not allow Gaza to be rebuilt until the demilitarization occurs. Nobody wants to put more money into a place that's gone on for so long until if it's just going to be taken over by terrorists or blown up again. We're also not going to restrict Israel's right to defend itself if there are any imminent threats, and so we had to clarify what that means. We could be seeing progress, in as little as 30 days, hopefully on starting to take some of the weapons out, and hopefully filling in some of the tunnels as well in the next 60 to 90 days as well. So progress could come quite soon, but we do need cooperation from both sides, and we're going to hopefully get through. But we've made a lot of progress to get here. For Israel, we think this is a win-win situation because if Hamas actually gives over the weapons and the tunnels, willingly over the next 60 to 90 days, that obviously would be the elimination of a huge security threat for Israel, almost an unthinkable achievement. And if they don't follow through now on their commitment, everyone will see that they're not genuine about peace, and then Israel will have a lot more support from the U.S. and others to go and finish the job in the appropriate way.
You met with Hamas officials yesterday. Do you think they're genuine about peace?
I mean, they said all the right things, but obviously it's very, very hard to trust, a terrorist organization that committed these terrible atrocities. But we had a very cordial meeting, and they said all the right things. And so we're going to give them a chance to perform, but it's going to have to be based on actions and steps. And I hope it will be true.
Special Envoy Kushner also discussing the memorandum of understanding with Iran that expires today. President Trump told Fox News early this morning that there is currently a back channel between administration officials and IRGC leadership in Iran. John, Jackie.
All right, Trey Yingst with the latest from Tel Aviv. Good job with Jared Kushner there, Trey. Thanks so much, Jackie.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
The president says a Navy destroyer intercepted that sanctioned Iranian cargo ship trying to get through the U.S. blockade in the Gulf of Oman, just east of the Strait of Hormuz. He says that vessel is now in Marine custody with a hole blown in its engine room. Meanwhile, Tehran reportedly is refusing to negotiate with the U.S. in Pakistan. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Talcott is live from Tel Aviv with the latest. Greg.
John, there are new questions about those planned upcoming talks between the United States and Iran as the U.S. and Iran face off in the Gulf. The U.S. Navy is enforcing a blockade around the Strait of Hormuz. President Trump just recently has said a naval ship intercepted an Iranian vessel that tried to get past the quarantine, refused to stop, forcing the U.S. to target this ship. And for the first time during this operation, U.S. service members went on board. He said in a post, in part, our Navy ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in the engine room. Right now, U.S. Marines have custody of the vessel. That's very crucial. U.S. service members on an Iranian ship. All this comes as talks are planned for Islamabad starting Tuesday between the U.S. and Iran, just ahead of the current ceasefire running out midweek. Now we're hearing from Iran as well, referencing the U.S. naval blockade and the rhetoric coming from the White House, indicating they might not even take part in the talks, or at least they still haven't decided. One state news agency blaming, I'm quoting here, Washington's excessive demands, unrealistic expectations, constant shifts in stance, repeated contradictions, and the ongoing naval blockade, which it considers a breach of the ceasefire. John, we are waiting on a final move from both sides to see if this is just a last-minute posturing and some skirmishing, or a real breakdown in the diplomatic path. We will see in the coming hours and days. Back to you.
The constant shifts in stance, that's unusual. The White House, it seems, at least from the talking points that have been released on the U.S. side of things, they've been pretty consistent about what they want from Iran.
Very consistent, yes. I mean, key points, and I think we still have to keep going back to the central issue that's at the heart of this, and that's the suspect nuclear program of Iran. The U.S. is demanding that the highly enriched uranium that Iran has be shipped out of the country. The enrichment process ends, and any thought of Iran building a nuclear weapon leaves their minds. Iran, a bit more circumspect on various fronts, saying again today, it is their right to have a nuclear program. There is a big, big gap between the U.S. and Iran right now. Prospects of a deal, especially with this latest skirmishing on the high seas, looks more and more dim. Back to you.
All right, Greg Palcott, our senior foreign affairs correspondent. Greg, thanks. So there's growing pressure now on Iran on both the diplomatic and military tracks. The White House says its negotiating team, is preparing to head to Islamabad with the ceasefire deadline fast approaching. President Trump is warning Iran to take the deal or else. Alex Hogan is at the White House with the latest. Alex.
Hi, John. So, yes, we are monitoring these latest developments and what had been a standstill in the Strait of Hormuz. Now, major escalation with President Trump posting on Truth Social that this Iranian cargo ship tried to get past the U.S. naval blockade. This is, again, part of what he wrote. The U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyer USS Spruance intercepted the Tuska, which is that Iranian cargo ship, in the Gulf of Oman and gave them fair warning to stop. The Iranian crew refused to listen, so our Navy ship stopped them right in their tracks by blowing a hole in their engine room. The president went on to say that the U.S. has the ship in custody and they are currently examining what is on board, and it comes after days of back and forth in the Strait. The White House has accused Iran of violating the ceasefire by opening fire on vessels yesterday, and Iran argues that the U.S. is violating the deal with its naval blockade. So more talks are expected to take place. Despite some back and forth this morning, the White House tells Fox that Vice President J.D. Vance will lead the U.S. delegation in Pakistan, and they will have about 1 day to negotiate a new deal before the current temporary ceasefire expires. Vice President J.D. Vance will be joined by envoys like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, and the U.S. team is expected to leave tomorrow. It comes after earlier today, President Trump posted this to Iran on social media saying, "We are offering a very fair and reasonable deal, and I hope that they take it, because if they don't, the United States is going to knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran." That's similar language to some of the comments that we heard from the president last weekend, comments that are already getting criticism from Democrats today who are arguing that this is escalatory and simply unhelpful.
We've lost our entire moral credibility. We have a president of the United States threatening to wipe out Iranian civilization, and people think it's normal. And then you have a situation where our troops are at risk, where a president who campaigned on peace is spending now $400 billion to spend more money on these wars.
Republicans today arguing that these measures and that the language is necessary to put enough pressure on Iran, especially ahead of potential talks that could take place in the coming days. Because again, John, we know that this very delicate ceasefire is only supposed to last until Wednesday. John.
All right, Alex Hogan. Alex, thanks. For more on this, let's bring in Behnam Ben Taleblu, Senior Director of the Iran Program at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and Elon Berman, American Foreign Policy Council Senior Vice President. Thanks, both of you, for being with us today. Elon, Iran